I were just reflecting on how the practice grows over time. I want to talk about friendship, and it's so easy, JD, because we're here. And I remember a time when neither of us was quite as skillful, and the practice that you offered tonight just feels so polished and so smooth, and I was able to go deep. I don't know if folks relate to this, but my breath was moving in circular ways. Anyway, I'm just so grateful for that practice. And it just reminds me of what I wanted to start talking about. So I want to talk about spiritual friendship and the ways in which we support each other. We have the three jewels of our practice, right? The Buddha nature in ourselves, the Dharma and the teachings of the Buddha, and then the Sangha is the third refuge and jewel. And oftentimes the Sangha is kind of the roughest one to get into. The, the personalities as you come together and practice, the challenges of language and just sharing space. Many of us have supported this Sangha for years, and it is not always easy, right? We have a great deep intention to be skillful with each other. We have great deep intention to create access, and EBMC is based on this foundation of, can we increase access to the Dharma for marginalized folks because of the historical context of racism and gender bias and homophobia, transphobia. And EBMC is supposed to be a refuge, and it is. And I just look towards the way in which we align ourselves, and how we build that refuge actually is in the practice. It isn't a switch that goes on and off. It is through the hard work of being in Sangha together. So I'm reminded of the qualities of friendship that are helpful in our practice. There's an idea that there are ways that we can practice and be with each other that support us. Right? I imagine like going on a journey and wanting to have somebody with us who is on the same journey. Right? The goals or the aspirations that we have in the Dharma, whether your practice is to awaken in this lifetime or not, we endeavor to have practices of mindful listening, mindful speech. We're on the Eightfold Path together. And when we're on it together, there's such a great quality about it that can really support it. There are moments when facing the hindrances. One of the hindrances that comes to me most often and easily is doubt. And when I doubt in my practice, well, you've been in this deep practice for more than 10 years, and still yet I struggle sometimes in the difficult times to sit and to practice. And it is often because, it's often somebody who's on my path with me. It's often talking to people like JD, or often like in community with people that I'm reminded and I'm drawn in. Well, did you practice? Do you want to practice? Do you want to meet? Do you want to meet at the Sangha tonight? And so I just been reminded about these qualities. Also, I was looking through the bookshelf because that's what you do. And my mother was a practicing Buddhist for years, and she gifted me this practice really. But one of her favorite books is this loving kindness book of Sharon Salzberg. And I was flipping through it, and there's just great exercises around friendship, because what is the spiritual friend? When I use the Pali word Kalyanamitta, right? This this friend on the journey with you. What does it mean to travel together and to be in practice with a true friend? And so I just want to read really quickly. One of the exercises around the meaning of friends from Sharon Salzberg is to think about what friendship means to you, what you value most in a friend, and what you most like to offer others as a friend. There are qualities of trust, candor, fairness, humor that stand out as being most important to you. What kind of person would you be able to turn to if you were in need? What does it mean to feel at home with someone? And what would you like others to feel in the value of your friendship? Simple questions, and yet I really believe that on the spiritual journey, having these friends is everything. There's this quote that often gets from the Pali's Sutta, from the Upada Sutta that I pulled up online, and it's this conversation between the Buddha and Ananda, his attendant, and Ananda in his enthusiastically is talking about what friendship means to him, and he says, "Oh, this is half of the holy life: admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie." And the Buddha smiles and looks back and says, "Don't say that, Ananda. Just don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, and admirable camaraderie is the whole entirety of holy life. When a monk has his admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, he can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path." And just reflecting on what qualities we share, and JD, it's been like years. Often look towards you for the practice and have learned from you. And I want to just say out loud in front of everybody here that it's been a joy. It's like, you are my Kalyana Mitta, you are my spiritual friend. And I hope that sharing that in front of this group inspires folks to consider what qualities you are nurturing within yourself and within your own friendship. Yeah. Not sure how that lands for you, JD, but I'd love to hear any reflections you have.
I feel really honored for you to consider me your Kalyana Mitra. It's it's a way that I think we hold each other up too. Like it's a way that, you saying that to me is like, oh wow. Huh. There's a way that's like, okay, there it's not, like the sense of like, oh, no one really notices what I do, or there's no really importance to what I do. And really this impact of our presence on each other, the way that we are with each other. And so just you sharing that makes me remember that there's that quote about, integrity being, or something about like when no one's looking, how you act. And I that's really important to me, because I am not somebody who really knows that much about self-care. Like, how do I really treat myself? And so like remembering that I'm with others, and that my caring is about the community, is just such a helpful practice for me. And I love that you brought up Ananda, because like when I think of the Buddha and Ananda, I totally think of queer family. Like I think, like this is what we do. I mean, supposedly Ananda was related to the Buddha, but the Buddha had created this community, and the Buddha and Ananda had a very intimate relationship. And that's often what we do in queer spaces, is that we leave home and we create community with people who are around us, community that supports us. And so when I think about the Buddha and Ananda and taking care of each other as they're growing older, and it really helps me remember about queer family. And it's okay if I'm putting a total queer spin on something that's not queer, because the people who reported these stories are going to report from the cultural norms of where they were. And some of the cultural norms that came through in the reporting of the Buddha stories were actually Victorian European lenses of sensibility. And so even if we like kind of also figure out like the 500 years before the Buddha stories were written down, and then they got written down in a patriarchal environment, and then, like all of these different lenses. And so I'm like, hell yeah, the Buddha and Ananda were a queer family, in this very broad sense of what queer means. Like, queer means how we care for each other, how we live outside of the heteronormative definitions of what it means to be successful. And, and I love that, because to me, it really helps place this sense of how do we live together in community. And so often, the impetus for practice, and myself included, was like, oh my gosh, I need to figure out something, like, how am I going to fix this mess here, as I mentioned earlier? Like, how do I fix this and bring more ease? And also, as the case will be, I was dating somebody who asked me if I wanted to go to a meditation group, and so I did, you know. So friends on the path, you know, got me into meditation, and she's still practicing, and I am too, and we're not together, but we, you know, we're really supported each other, and so um, I think it's a really great to take this idea of Sangha to remember that you can't wake up alone. You know, there's really no such thing as waking up alone. I mean, you can wake up alone, like you wake up in the morning alone or something like, but there really is no alone. There's no alone. And that's a frame of reference that we put on ourselves. And, you know, even at that beginning of the meditation, feeling into the earth and that connection with the earth and the connection with the trees and the connection, we're not alone at any moment. And to me, that has been such an important understanding that I've gathered through practice is when I can open up a little bit and lessen that fear and the projections that I have on others and just feeling into the connection that I have. And maybe the fear arises and all of the projections, and then can I work with those too? So I don't know. What do you think about it? Am I queering the Dharma too much, Patrick, or what do you want to add in there? Is there more queerness to this for
There's
you?
so much queerness in the Dharma. I love that. And I totally feel you on like, I don't mind queering something that maybe wasn't all the way queer. It's certainly done to us plenty of times. You know, there's when the teachers get together and there's a couple of folks in the coordinating committee. Crystal, I think Rachel's on this call, and there's some folks who really hold it down. And part of the teacher like mapping for the year is that we wanted this theme. So this queer AF came up last year, and like, what is so queer in the Dharma? So much. You know, a lot of it I don't mind being in a place like EBMC. I get to say the queer parts and identify it and call it out and hold on to it and like really revel in that queerness. Because here's something, you know, I want to share just like something that was challenging in my queerness in the Dharma. So if people are familiar with the precepts, right? The precepts are conditions that we create, that we take. If you were a monk or a nun, you would take a list of very many of them. Oftentimes, if we're lay people and we go on retreat, we'll take them, and they include, you know, not killing, not taking what's not freely offered, not misusing intoxicants, staying away from wrong speech. And then there's one around sexual misconduct. And when I first came into the Dharma, I was at Spirit Rock and I took the precepts, and there was this thing about, you know, understanding the harm that has been caused by sexual misconduct in the world. I agreed to not contribute to that. And unconsciously, I was a little uncomfortable. And I was like, well, fortunately, you're on a silent retreat, you have plenty of time to think about it. But the more I sat with it, it was like sexual misconduct. I had been told most of my life that my attraction to my gender, my, you know, my queerness was sexual misconduct. There were no safe places to have, you know, for me to have sex. There were no like images or stories about people like me. And so I remember growing up and like my family was Irish Catholic, and, you know, my grandmother, my aunts and uncles. And so I just really remember having a hard time understanding that what are the precepts and how can they be supportive of queerness instead of like really making me challenged. It took me a long time to like involve myself and say, okay, sexual misconduct is not gay sex for me. That's not misconduct, right? Like consensual, like inviting, creative, beautiful, connected sex as a queer man, like I get to have that and it's not misconduct. And I'm telling you, like just that simple, it feels so simple, but it took years. And sometimes I still giggle when I hear that because I'm like, I'm not misconduct, you're misconduct. And I'm like, you know, I just want to point to some places where maybe other folks who are queer have had similar experiences or understandings, like the precept of preventing sexual misconduct and not perpetuating the harm and understanding how it has really harmed our communities has so much to do with, consent and clarity and honesty and transparency and integrity. And it didn't have anything to do with queerness. And so maybe I'm the only one, but I wanted to point towards something that was really queer in the Dharma for me. And that is like my healing around the third precept of not participating in sexual misconduct. Is that too
Okay.
queer, JD?
Well, you know what? All I could think about is like, you know how like when people take like names and make them like drag names. I was like, you're not misconduct, I'm misconduct. And all I could think of was like misconduct out there. Like, here I am, misconduct. And the thing that, but has been really helpful for me with that particular precept though is about like your sexual, like being aware of your sexual energy, like the power that I have in community. And so I really appreciate you bringing the our attention to this, because I think we can be seen, like when anybody brings up the sense of no, I can't help but laughing, that it's like, okay, I'm unskillful by definition, like just using the terms wholesome and unwholesome can also feel like, well, like that wholesome is often seen as heteronormative, patriarchal, and unwholesome, therefore is me, but that's not actually the terms that the Buddha is putting on it, although that interpretation can be broad from the, just the cultural norms. And so having a different language like skillful and unskillful, and looking at power and sexual energy can be helpful for me to kind of figure out like, oh, this is what this means, and how do I work with it in that way. So yeah. And then I think what you're pointing to also is just the importance of not throwing out ethics and integrity because it has been aligned with what we might call in this culture the moral majority, or others have taken that we can think about ethics and integrity without within our own life, and what does it mean to live in accordance with our own values, in accordance with truth and beauty and non-hatred, and really bring that in and say, this is how I want to direct my life. So yeah, as just bringing up the ideas of the precepts can also bring into this idea of you have to, or you need to be a certain way, and that can all get into the judgmental mind. So I really love the way of the sense of we do it because of our interconnectedness, the way that we live together in community. And I just want to end by sharing this quote from Bell Hooks, who practiced Buddhism and has this quote about loving friendship. And so she says, loving friendships provide us with a space to experience the joy of community in a relationship where we learn to process all of our issues, to cope with differences and conflict while staying connected. And just that to me encapsulates, I'm going to try to put it here in the chat. All right, everyone, there we go. Just this way that it brings us both, and that we're experiencing the joy of community, and we're processing it's this flow, and we have to cope with all of our differences, and we try to stay connected. And so just shout out to Larry Yang and his book, Waking Up Together. And that's a lot of what I think that we're doing here when we come together at EBMC and come together at Alphabet Sangha, coping with our similarities and our differences. So thanks for this engaging conversation tonight, Patrick.